Okay, in terms of the stuff, deadlines are unchangeable. So, exam 2, quizzes part 3, deadline to find November 16th, in the day.
I'm no going with team.
16.
2 and 3. Okay.
Oh, exam 2, quizzes part 3.
Yeah.
Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, last day of classes. Paper, drafted deadline November 9th, because the 12th, no cloud, university closed, because the holiday. +5 deadline November 14th, end of day. Merge deadline November 21st, end of day. Desperation deadline December 8th, end of day. Before pressing on to the new stuff, anything about any previous stuff, stuff B or stuff that's been, it needs more stuff. It's all about this stuff.
So today's, cause I'm trying to do quiz 2 and 3. Exam, what is it? Exam 2.
Exam 2.
Here's exam 3. Exam 3 is about you in the mind, right?
Oh, exam 3 is about, exam 3 is about the stuff we're covering now.
Yeah.
And exam 2 is stuff we covered before.
Okay, I didn't do too good on that. So.
Yeah, the quiz is part 3. So exam 2 covers previous stuff, which, and that deadline's 16.
But I've already taken, now you can open me back up and I can try to redo it.
And this stuff is part 3, and the deadline for this test, exam for this is at the end of last day of classes, December 7th.
So, okay. So I'm actually ahead of the thing. Yeah.
Good.
No, that ain't good, because I've been doing it wrong.
Not good. Okay, so last time looking at our good dead friend David Hume, talking about his theory of causation. And what he was trying to do is see, from the standpoint of metaphysics, the question of necessary causation is, are there necessary connections between things such that if A happens, then B must happen? That it's a matter of necessity. So if you've got B, you've got to have A. And in a way, as you saw, the sort of laws of science seem to assume that A, if you have A, you have B, you can't have A without B being present. There's a necessary connection. So what Hume tries to do, he goes in to investigate this. And one thing that makes Hume different from any other thinkers here is that I mentioned it's kind of like the monster in the closet deal. If you were a psychiatrist and parents bring in their kid and says, little Billy says the monster in the closet, you don't go monster hunter and say, I wonder what sort of beast is dwelling in the closet, and I wonder what fine parts I can harvest from its body to make stuff out of. Your question is not, what is the monster in the closet? The question is, why does little Billy think there's a monster in the closet? And so in a way Hume is doing is kind of that approach. So kind of his approach to philosophy is not, are there necessary connections, but why do we think so? Now, he claims that when we go looking for this, and again, one severe limiting factor is he's an empiricist. So you have to be able to trace back any claim that you make to a empirical perception. So he claims that from looking at external objects, stuff happening up there, we have no idea of this. Now, because we don't see it. Now, there of course is a fair question, what would it even look like? What are we even looking for? So then he turns to, maybe there's another way to do this. We can look at our internal impressions, look inward, and maybe we can see a necessary connection there. But he thinks, no. Why no? Well, for the following reasons. First thing is the classic mind-body problem, which, as we saw, is the problem of how does if you believe the mind is this immaterial stuff, how does it move the physical body? And Hume says, this is a great mystery. So if we try to solve the problem of necessary connection by looking inside, well, the mind-body problem is that same kind of problem. how does the mind cause stuff in the body? And Hume says kind of dramatically that the motion, if you could move the planets with your mind, that would be no more mysterious than being able to move your body with your mind. Now, of course, we think of like, if someone had the power to move stuff with their mind, like planets, they'd be like super powered, but in a way, it's a difference in scale, not a difference in kind. Because he thinks, if your mind is somehow driving around your body, that's pretty weird. So he says, mind-body problem, we don't see the necessary connection, so we haven't got the idea. So how does he kind of support that? Well, one thing he points out, which is kind of interesting, is the matter of voluntary control. So we have voluntary control over what?
Muscles.
Yeah, you can move your hand. But do we have voluntary control over like our liver? Yeah, which is probably good if you like, if we get to liver. And the only way we know about this is by experience. So we say, okay, I can move my hands, but you can't control, like suppose your pancreas isn't working properly. You can't say, okay, I'm gonna will my pancreas to pancreas properly, which is kind of unfortunate. And so he claims we have no understanding of how that works, or so he claims. The process is unknown, the power is unknown. So he says that looking inside, we don't find the answer. So sort of the problem he creates is, we're trying to see this necessary connection. We look at stuff outside of us, we don't see it. So he says, maybe if we look inside, we can see it better there, because we're most familiar with ourselves. And his claim is, we don't see it there either. We just see one thing followed by another. We don't see the connection. Now again, it's important to note that Hume is an empiricist. So if you were to bring up, well, maybe reason could tell us that it is the case, Hume would say, nope, you got to be able to trace it back to an observation. Now Hume does point out that when it comes to normal stuff, for example, fire burning, ice cooling, etc., do we think that we understand how this stuff works? Yeah, I mean, we expect that. When you go to make tea, you don't put the tea kettle in the refrigerator unless you're making iced tea, and put it on the stove. Now, Hume does note that in the case of extraordinary phenomena, really weird stuff, then we acknowledge our lack of understanding. But, as he points out, there's really no difference, except these are kind of like extraordinary. We still don't see those causal connections. Why not? Well, his reasoning kind of smushed together kind of works like this. So how do we engage in this seemingly reasoning of necessary connections? Well, I'll illustrate it using a stupid example when I was an undergrad. There was, this is back in the day before, well, I did kind of have cable, but they didn't pay extra for that, so I did not have cable. And I said, no, small 13-inch black and white TV with rabbit ears. And I was watching TV, and we get all staticky, and one of my friends was talking to me, and he got staticky, and so I was too lazy to get up, so I snapped my finger at the TV, and the picture was immediately perfectly clear. And then he was like, wow, how did you do that? And I was like, powers. Now, in that case, of course, with one thing happening, if you were like a critical thinker, would you think, wow, you must have TV powers? No, you think what? That was just pure luck. Coincidence. It just so happened that I snapped my fingers and it cleared up. You wouldn't think there was any connection. But suppose that that TV got staticky again, and I snapped my fingers and it cleared up again. What do you actually happen? Yeah, then you might start thinking, maybe there's something going on. And if I did it like a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, a sixth time, a seventh time.
I look for what you got in your hand.
Yeah, then you might suspect that that might be like a clapper or something connected to an antenna. Yeah, so when you first see it, you would think, okay, just pure coincidence. I don't see the necessary connection. But then after so many times, eventually you would think this can't be coincidence, there's gotta be a causal connection. And Hume, his example is not the snapping of fingers, but with billiard balls. Someone sees it happening, and then, like the first time, like a kid sees like billiards, or anything happening, they have no idea. But eventually they see it happening, they expect, the stick hits the ball and it moves. Or if I was able to, every time I snap my finger, the TV cleared up, then you suspect there must be something going on. Now, what Hume points out correctly is this. If you take the first time it happens, finger snap, TV clears up, do you see the connection? No. Second time, do you see the connection?
It brings about suspicion.
Yeah, you're suspicious, but does it look any different? If you looked at a photo of if you looked at like a film, I suppose someone filmed it. They filmed me doing it 100 times, and there was no, they had the TV facing away, so you couldn't see what's on the TV. You just see like, it, that you would be able to tell what time it was. And they had like 100 videos with no timestamp. Would there be any difference between those videos? No. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to tell. You wouldn't be able to say, "Aha, video 99. I see the connection." And so, if you look at any particular incidents, you never ever see the connection. You just see one thing followed by another. So what Hume says happens is, eventually, we never see any difference. If there was a picture of me snapping my fingers, without a timestamp, you wouldn't know whether that was the first time or the 1000th time, because you can't see any difference. What Hume says is, psychologically, after so many times, what happens? Yeah, we
just forget it, we ignore it.
Oh, if you saw me do, seemingly do it like 20 times, if the TV gets fuzzy again, and I go to snap my fingers, what do you think's going to happen?
It's not
Clear up.
Yeah, you think it'll clear up, and you'd be surprised if it
doesn't
didn't.
clear up.
But then, the first time it happened, you just thought it was coincidence. But what's the difference? Well, the only difference is you've seen it happen a lot of times. You don't see anything new, you just see it a lot. And so Hume says, psychologically, we become conditioned. We expect it to happen. So kind of crudely put,
We come numb to it, it's just expected to happen.
yeah, I mean, many years later, a fellow Pavlov did his famous dog,
Yeah.
experiments.
Pavlov in his house, that's what it is.
And we're basically, human way is anticipating this because his view is we just expect it to happen. And so we think that the next time, after so many times, we just think, okay, it's gonna happen again. But we have no justification before that. So he says there's two definitions we have of cause. One is one thing happens and we expect the second thing to happen. Snap your fingers, you expect the TV to clear up. Or the person is, taking the stick and you expect the ball to move. Or you put the kettle on the stove and turn on the heat, the gas, you expect it to eventually boil. The second definition is the idea of one is followed by the idea of another. So you have the idea of the tea kettle on the stove, and then you have the idea that it's going to boil. Now Hume says the problem with these definitions is they actually have nothing to do with cause. Because the first one is just one thing follows another. The other is the idea of one thing follows the idea of another. But nowhere in there is.
Well, why do I see all of them as the same? One thing follows another, and causal is the same thing, synonymous with each other.
Well, Hume would say that we think that it's a cause, but he says that's not really causal. I mean, you could disagree with Hume, just because he's Hume dead doesn't mean he's right. But Hume says, if we go with, one thing happens, another thing happens, well, it's not really a necessary causal connection. You're saying it's one damn thing after another. Or if you say I have the idea of something, followed by the idea of something else, that's still not a cause, that's just one idea after another. And so Hume thinks The problem with all the evidence we have is either one thing is followed by another, or our idea of one thing is followed by an idea of another, basically association in psychology, that there's no actual cause in there. It's just one thing followed by another. So he illustrates it with an example of playing like a violin. Well, what happens is either the string is touched and the sound follows, or you expect that when someone plays the violin, that a sound will follow. But Hume says there's no cause in there, there's no necessary connection.
See, that's where, again, you just proved my point. When I strum the bow, if it doesn't touch, there's no sound. But when I strum the bow and it touches the string, it causes a sound. See, there's cause there.
There's a sound, because you never actually see the cause.
Yes, when I strum that string.
Well, Hume would say, in common sense we'd say, it causes it, but Hume says, you just see one thing followed by another. You don't actually...
But that's why I don't follow his logic.
Yeah, because it seems, counterintuitive. But it does actually make a good point, because we expect all this stuff. Go back to my example of the finger snapping.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I snap my finger, every time and the TV, straightens out, how can you tell whether that's just coincidence, or if there's really something going on, that I really have a power? And, the way we do it is, if it happens a lot, we think, there's gotta be something to it. But the very next time, I could snap my fingers and nothing could happen, maybe never happen again. And so, you never, at least as Hume sees it, you never know what the next snap's going to bring, so to speak, and so we just expect it. So yeah, every time you put the kettle on the stove and turn the gas on, it boils it. But will that happen next time? And Hume says you don't know, because you don't see a necessary, to use a crappy analogy, think of like the movie The Matrix at the end. And Neo can see the Matrix, so he can see all the code. Mm-hmm. And metaphorically, that could be kind of like seeing the necessity. You could you'd look at it and see the code. Mm-hmm. But we don't do that. We just have empirical observations. We make up rules, like apply heat to water boils, but we never see the code of the universe. So we just expect it to, to use, to kind of motivate this, think of the following analogy. When, and we'll see this again in the problem reduction. When, imagine if you were a character in the video game. You lived in a video game. And one thing that happens in video games, of course, is they'll have patches and updates and nerfs. So you could be on one day you're going through the battlefield, just slaughtering everything with your super gun, and then a patch goes through that nerfs your super gun, and now it's not super anymore. And from your standpoint, the world all the laws just change. Because before you thought, it's always going to, it was killing perfectly before, it's going to be a great gun. But then, nerf, and now it doesn't do that. And so we could be one nerf away from reality, changing. And again, I don't think we're in a video game, but one way to motivate that is imagine if you were like a character in a video game that you don't know, you don't see the code, so you don't know what's going to happen. Likewise, in reality, we don't see the code, so maybe the next time it's pure coincidence. Water's always boiled, but maybe it doesn't have to. And yeah, and intuitively think, that's stupid. I'm never worried that my tea is. I don't go, gosh, will I be able to have my tea, or will I be able to have my popcorn, or we never worry about that. But then the question is, how confident can we?
That would be a nice story to write. You sitting there wondering, I'm not sure, because there's nothing that says it's going to happen.
Yeah. And so far, nothing's gone wrong. But think about superstitions, where people think something. They think something's going to happen, but it does. Of course, it probably doesn't. Now, at this point, you may think that Hume would say, well, pass out causation, not going to do us any good. But Hume actually says we got to use this stuff. Why? Well, he thinks that it's what we use, or have to use, to excuse me,
That's-
to connect distant times and places with today. Because Hume, in addition to his writing in philosophy, he also is pretty successful in writing the history of England. And if you're going to do history and not just like think, make stuff up, you've got to say that what you're writing now connects to the past, the real past, real history. And so Hume thinks the way we connect to the history, distant times and places, and he's a empiricist, we've got to have a connection. You've got to be able to trace it back to initial perception. And so in a way, what Hume is presenting, although it's like talking about causation and metaphysics, he's also in a way presenting a view of doing the methodology of history, that you have to be able to trace it back to an original source, someone who was there, which is one way to look at history. If you're going to say what happened, you've got to be able to trace it back to someone who was actually there, or the history is less reliable. And he thinks what does this, of course, is this causal connection, one thing causing another. But then again, the way he sees causation is as a custom, as a habit. Again, Pavlov dog is a good example. The way we sort things out is, like in the case of me snapping my finger, in case you're wondering, eventually it didn't work. So I guess there was only 3 use power. Use up my only uses. But of course, every time you put the kettle on the stove, as long as the gas is, or the electricity is going, it will always boil. And so you get habituated. It happens often enough, then eventually psychologically you expect it.
So we're all just conditioned.
Yeah. And things could stop, as we'll see when we talk about problem reduction in the future, things could just stop working that way. Because again, we don't see the necessary connection. We don't see the code, the matrix. And so it's sort of like the character in the video game who, think of like, video games often have like bugs that people exploit. Like you go someplace and there's a chest there that every time you open it, it's full of treasure. You constantly just open that sucker, load of inventory. And then, the next day you go back and you open it once and you get one thing and it vanishes. You're like, what the hell? Yeah, because you can't see the code. So we don't know if we're in that situation where things get, we don't see the necessary connection, so things may not work. Now again, common sense tells us, yeah, water's always going to boil. I don't worry that when I go to step on my accelerator that my truck will suddenly stop. I don't worry that when I eat yogurt that it'll transform me into, T-Rex. Psychologically, I'm worried about that stuff. But then the thing is, if I'm asked, how can you prove for sure that that's not going to happen, the answer has to be, I can't. Yeah, so even though this is kind of crazy, Hume does make a pretty good point. Now, but in a way, he kind of nerfs the seemingly craziness, because it would seem he's saying, you can't know that anything causes anything, there's no way to know causation, but then he says, you still gotta, the tormenting sneeze. I think it's all pixels drifting off the projector. Severe allergy to pixels.
Wow.
Could be a thing, digital allergies, it's the future. Yeah, so his ultimate conclusion is not, no causation. He basically says, yeah, we got to use this. But in a way, the only foundation is essentially custom. We can't say that we know this, the necessary connection, yet we have to use this. So, kind of weird. Now, Hume's writing on causal connection centuries later inspired me to apply his same reasoning to chance. Now, if you ask people about chance, pretty much everyone believes in chance.
Yeah.
For example, dice. People believe dice are random, unless they're unless they're rigged. Similarly, we think if the lottery is run fairly, that the winning numbers, there are lotteries that are rigged, obviously. So we think that when the ping pong balls are blowing away in the thing, if it's being run honestly, we think it's just random chance. You know, there's just any number has an equal chance of coming up. It's all just random what they are. There's no way to sit down and predict winning numbers. Although there are people who will sell you books claiming that they can predict how random numbers are going to come.
But mathematically, you can.
You can predict odds.
Yeah.
But you can't predict. I mean, if you had access to like ping pong balls and like the airflow and stuff, you could
The probability.
yeah, there's probably a slight, because they're not perfect ping pong balls and the airflow is not perfect, so there probably would be a slight chance of one number coming up more possibly. So, but of course, if the number came up a lot, they'd go. If they were honest, they would go and they're like, wait, 5's coming up all the time. What's up with 5? Yeah, so we tend to believe in random chance. We believe in dice, and often people believe in associated things like good luck and bad luck, but still, you know, it's a matter of chance. Now, even though I believe in it, an argument can be made, which I will make, that our belief in chance is completely unjustified. And to do this, of course, what I do is steal David Hume's discussion of causation. Now, we just saw Hume's causation argument, and it goes like this. If you ask people, do you believe in causation, everyone says, yes, yes I do. For example, if you see a billiard ball striking another one and moving, we think we've seen causation. If we put the tea kettle on the stove and make the tea, or we fry the bacon in the pan or something, we think we're seeing causation. But of course, as Hume points out, we don't see causation. We see one thing followed by another. Heat applied to turn on the gas, tea kettle whistles, put bacon in the pan, it turns from like raw bacon to cooked bacon. So as Hume said, if we see enough cases of X, heat applied to bacon, or heat turning, uncooked bacon to bacon, we expect this will always happen. But as Hume argued, no matter how many times we see this, we're still not justified. All we're doing when we say X causes Y, we're making a psychological claim. We're saying we expect this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says, heat causes bacon to cook, we're saying, I expect that when I apply heat to my bacon will cook and not like turn to ice or turn into snakes and cactus. Horror movie stuff. So how does this apply to chance? Well, again, most people believe in chance. That if you were to take dice, and roll them, then unless the dice were rigged, that you'd expect them, like if you're rolling a 20-sided die, that on average, you roll it 20 times, you'll get 120. And no, you wouldn't be shocked and amazed if a die, like particularly like a 6-sided die, and you rolled it 4 times and got like, 2, 2, and 2. It would, and you wouldn't be shocked by that because it's not impossible. Now, if it kept rolling like 1 over and over again, you'd go, loaded. Now, we think we're seeing chance, but we're not seeing chance. We're just seeing the dice roll and land. We don't see chance is not something we see. What color is chance? How big is chance? What does it taste like? Yeah, we're not seeing chance. You're just seeing dice. They may think, that's great.
It's the principle of chance.
We think it's there, but the question is, how do we know? Now, one reason we're believing in chance is this. We tend to attribute chance to things that are unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if someone takes a one-sided die and rolls it, and it just keeps going 1, we're like, yeah, that's not a chance, because it's,
It's got one.
yeah, it's got one side. Or if you have a die that's got all 1s on it, and it's rolled, it's like, look, it's 1. It's 1 again. So we believe in chance because it's unpredictable. Like with the dice rolls, we can't predict we know it's going to be somewhere between, 1 and 6 or 1 and 20 or whatever. But unless the die is loaded, we can't predict it. Because we can't predict it, we infer that it must be chance. Because we say, you know, unpredictability means chance. I don't know what it's gonna be, so it's gotta be random. Now that, of course, is tempting. This, of course, as Hume would say, explains the psychology of the belief. Why do I think there's chance? Well, I can't predict the outcome. I can't say it's gonna be 5, or it's gonna be 6. And pixels. I'm getting my pixel shot. Yeah, be sure to get your pixel shot. So get the pixels are a dangerous thing. Think of the movie, Pixels, that was terrible. So you want to definitely get a shot against that. Also emotions, you want to get a shot against that. Now, there are many things, of course, that are unpredictable that we don't think are just random chance. For example, suppose you don't know chemistry, and you have all these chemicals, and you're mixing them. Well, you can't predict what's going to happen, because some things have really weird reactions. Like you mix together 2 liquids, and they turn into a solid. I remember, I used to, like most kids, I like mess with chemicals, process survive. I don't mean like ingesting them, I mean like mixing stuff. I remember one time I was like mixing some things, and that happened. I mixed 2 liquids, and the thing gets super hot, so I dropped it, but it turned into a solid. But I did not predict that. But it wasn't random, because if you every time you do it, you know, I realized, okay, every time you mix those 2 things, you get that result. So there are things that we can't predict that we don't think are random. So saying something is unpredictable just reports our ignorance. We don't know what's going to happen, but it doesn't prove that there's chance or reveal the nature of chance. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true, we probably do believe in chance because we can't predict some things, but unpredictability doesn't prove there's chance. It just shows that we don't know. Now, a second reason we believe in chance is this. We think that things could have turned out differently. For example, with rolling about, like if you go to, pixels. Like when someone goes to Vegas, you know, they're rolling those bones and eking those snake eyes. They would think they could have won. And you'd say, well, yeah, if the table, the dice aren't rigged, the table's not rigged, then yeah, we think there's a chance of winning. So we come to believe that things could have been different, and so we believe that chance was involved. That with the dice, that it could have been something else, or with the lottery. You know, we know the winning number to like the Powerball, but it could have been something. If it's, you know, we think it would have been something else. You could have won. If they would have picked your number, you would have won, and picking is just chance. Now, even though that's pretty tempting, here is one problem. Chance is more than just, it's possible that things could have been different. Why? Well, because things could be different in situations that are not random, that are not chance. For example, suppose you believe in free will. That's not random. And you go to order at a restaurant from the menu. If you believe in free will, could you have picked something else? Like suppose you get the cheeseburger with mushrooms. Could you have gone with a pizza instead? Yeah, and if you believe that in free will, you don't think it's just random, that your brain is rolling dice to pick menu items. You would think, yeah, I'm freely choosing this. It could have been different, but not chance. So we need more than just have chance. We need more than things could have been different, right? Because intuitively we think things could be different.
Say situation.
Yeah, by free choice. That if you if you pick something else. So what is this something more, the something extra? Well, the idea is this. Chance would seem to require that things could have been different even if everything was identical to the original event, that nothing else changed. For example, one way we may think, okay, we could show chance, as in, like empirically with an experiment, is to perfectly recreate the event. I mean, one easy way to do this would be to have a dice rolling machine, where it picks up the die, it's in like a sealed container, so there's no air or wind, it's on a stabilized platform, so even like micro, tremors in the earth can't affect it, and it, takes exactly the same amount of time. So the little robot arm, picks it up, it makes sure that, it laser scans the die and shifts it around so it's exactly where it was, and then, drops it precisely. And then it keeps doing that. Now, what we'd expect to see is, if it picks it up and, drops it exactly, we'd expect the die to do what? It would still,
We do the same thing.
it'd still roll, yeah, it'd still seem to generate different numbers, like it wouldn't always, yeah, if you just dropped it, you could actually, if you do it right, you can drop a die so it doesn't roll, which would always give you the same number, but if you dropped it so it would roll, you would still be seemingly,
Different number.
yeah, different numbers. So a person might say, aha, that's randomness, because everything is controlled, dropping the die, I'm controlling all the factors, no error, it doesn't involve like the error of the human hand rolling it, it's got machine precision. So clearly there is chance. But of course, there's a problem. Namely this, there is one factor that you can't replicate, namely time. So in order to be a properly scientific experiment, all variables have to be controlled. But what's not being controlled is, of course, time. It's always happening at a different time. So recreating is a recreation. It doesn't show how that could have been different. It just shows that the first time it happened, Robo-Roller rolled a 15. The second time it happened, Robo-Roller rolled a 12. The third time it rolled a 14. Is this really random? Well, you don't know, because it's happening at different, intuitively you might say, well, yes, surely it's gonna be random, but the thing is, you're not really recreating that event. It's a different roll, different time. Now, if you wanna go super sci-fi, what if you could travel back in time and witness the event again? Well, suppose like I'm gonna solve this mystery, and you build your robo-roller, and then you build a time machine. Okay, then you roll, have the die roll at exactly 4:13 p.m., and then you wait, go back in time, observe it. In that case, if you saw it roll, a 13, and then you go back in time, and then it rolls at the same exact time, then it rolls like a 14, you might say, it truly is random chance. But the problem is, of course, when you go back in time, you change things. Because it's not the same scenario, because you're back, you traveled in time, and so now you change things. It's not the same exact event. So time travel doesn't show that things could be different because of chance. It just shows that if things are different, things are different. Because by traveling back in time, you would make things different. It wouldn't be the same event occurring again. It would be different because you make it different by being there. Now, getting even weirder sci-fi, what about parallel worlds? And I stole this idea from, well, what inspired me for this was an episode of Doctor Who, of course. And there's, I think the episode is Inferno. And there's one where there's a mining company, they're trying to dig down super deep in the earth, and of course it's gonna turn out to be a disaster. And kind of one of the twists on it is if a super drilling disaster isn't enough, the Doctor gets blasted to another parallel world, similar to the world, similar thing, except the people are different. And the Doctor says free will is not an illusion because you have different worlds and people are different. And so I decided to steal that idea here and say, well, what if you were able to transfer, Rick and Morty style to, or Doctor Who style to other worlds? And then what you could do, again, this would be super weird in science, pretty clearly impossible, but to prove the chance was real, it would seem you need a parallel world just like ours, in which, using the example of the die comes up some other number than, it's what it was rolled here. So you go to, you roll the die here, see what it is. Oh, this pixel is killing me. You travel to a parallel world, and then you observe, I guess, your parallel self observing the die, and if the roll is different, like here it was a 3, and you go to an exactly similar parallel world where the roll is like a 4, you would say, aha, chance has been proven. There's a world just like this one where that same die roll was different.
But, what was Lewis, that was talking about the world and realism?
Yep, on the plurality worlds.
Yeah. He was saying something similar to this, that though you're similar worlds, but one world doesn't indicate what's gonna happen in the next world.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you go to a world, the problem is, of course, is that the role in this world is not the same as the role in that world. So the fact that you could have other parallel worlds where things are different doesn't prove there's chance. It just proves
They're
that
different.
Yeah, different worlds are different.
Yeah. And that's why I was, in my story, I'm using what he said to show that if there were similar worlds, that you can then come and interact with one another in the different worlds. And it's just kind of odd. You can phantom, you got an Earth here, and you billion light years away, you got another Earth, and then something happened, you could come in and cause those two worlds to blend. So, it's crazy.
It is crazy.
Going by the logic of the other example, wouldn't your presence also change what would have happened there without you?
Yeah, because if you do travel to another world, then you would influence the world. Now, one way someone could try to work around it is to have like you don't actually go to the world, you would have like a magic mirror on the wall where you could see into other worlds. So I guess you could try to work out, you could observe the past, like in a time mirror. Of course, if you have a time mirror, you would just see the same thing happening.
But if you're in there, if the worlds are similar but different, like for instance, if in both worlds you have the same people, but they can be doing the same or even different things. So are you changing the world if you interact then because they are similar in nature because you're there? Are you still changing the world?
Yeah, because if you went to a different world, your presence would change things. Because in your world, it happened a certain way. You go to like a similar world, but then when you get there, you're adding something different to that world. And so even if the die roll in the parallel world were, in order for the situation to be identical, you'd have two identical worlds. So going to a world that's parallel doesn't prove that that there's chance here. It just shows that other world is, because if every world was determined, traveling to different worlds,
Wouldn't matter.
you'd expect to see, say,
Same
different
thing.
results, but it wouldn't prove that there's chance, because deterministic worlds would look exactly the same as this world. And of course, if we go to identical world, the worlds would be identical, we wouldn't have two worlds, we just have one. So it seemed that our belief in chance, random chance, is a matter of psychology. Namely, we think it's unpredictable, so it must be random, because they can't predict it. But then, of course, we realize there are some things we predict wrong, or think are unpredictable, but that's just, we don't know, like just our ignorance. Then, of course, we also think that things, could have been different, but we have no proof for that, because we have no way of establishing that things could have been different. And even if we do travel back through time, we change things, if we go to like a parallel world, it's not the same world. So, I mean, to use like a sci-fi show example, suppose you have someone they're tormented with the fact that they believe that they could have done something different to save like somebody's life. And so they travel to a parallel world, keep trying to travel to parallel worlds and try to save the person. Well, if they save the person there, does that prove they could have saved the other person back then? No. It's kind of like if someone really wanted to run really fast and they couldn't run fast in the past, and they train really hard and run fast. They say, oh, I could have run really fast then. It's like, well, no, because things have changed. Yeah, so it seemed weirdly enough, even though we really do believe in chance, we have no justification for it. Because, I mean, in the case of dice, again, we see that the dice goes, and we say, oh, it must be random, but we don't know. It does come out true. They do come in different numbers, most of the time. But, imagine the following scenario. Suppose you're looking at a computer screen, and it says, hi there, I'm a random number generator. Hit the space bar and I'll put up a random number for you. And you hit the space bar, and the number 8 appears. Well, was that really random?
Calculated.
Hey, you don't know. Hit the space bar again, you get a 20. Random? Well, the only way to know, again, would be to get into the code. Because you could have, someone could create a seeming random number generator just by having a whole bunch of numbers. You just have, 20, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 12, 15, and just have a ton of numbers. So every time somebody hits that, it just, puts up one of those numbers in the list. But of course, that's not random. It looks random, but you can't tell. Just like, or to use another example, somebody creates like a CGI dice roll, and they set the numbers they're going to roll because they're programming it. And you look at it, and the CGI dice look just like real dice, and you don't see any chance. So it seems to be right. We really kind of believe in chance. We believe in randomness, but we have no justification for it because we don't know if we really live in a random universe because there's no way to prove it. Because everything that happens once. We don't get like a re-roll, and we can't see and if we could go back, we would be changing stuff. We would be changing the events. And we can't see into the code. I mean, people claim they can. They claim like, oh, I can, disprove randomness, but you can't see into the deep code of the universe and say, there it is, RNG, right there. Yeah, if you're all knowing, then you would know this, but we're not. So the conclusion would be this: our belief in chance and causation seems to be totally psychological. We have no idea if this is a random universe or not. Now, as a practical matter, we do act as if it does. We engage in gambling. People play games of chance. We have computer games where they have random generation. You think like you do you do an event, you do something, you get a reward, we have a loot table, and you think it's just random. But you don't know, you know? So if you're on the receiving end and you can't see the code, maybe because a friend of mine thinks that the game designers are potentially screwing him over all the time whenever he gets crappy stuff. And I'm like, man, dude, that would take a lot of work. You think they're just sitting there on their computer waiting to screw you over? He's like, yes.
So you're using, seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I'm basically stealing Hume. Because Hume says, you know, because analysis of causation, you never see causation, you just see stuff happen a lot and say, you know, okay, I expect it to happen, so I think there's causation. And with chance, we can't predict, you know, certain things. So we think dice must be random, must be chance. We think things could have been differently, so we think that, you know, there are random things. But we have no actual way of proving that. We feel that it's true, but we can't prove that it's true. So the universe could be random or deterministic. It would look exactly the same. From our experience, just like with the numbers here, you can't, if all you have access to is the screen, you can't tell if it's just a list of numbers, you know, coming up, created, somebody just writing it down, or if it's really random until you can get into the code. And we can't get into the code of the universe and see, and if we could, we don't know if the code is really the code. So, yeah, no chance for chance. Okay, next time, more stuff. So have a good rest of the day, and next time we'll do more things.